We are here at the Woods Theater at Fresno State for a sneak preview of the very first show in the new season. It's called Dracula, a Feminist Revenge Fantasy. Really? So we are here with Stephen and Paulina, and we're going to be talking about this new show at Fresno State. Paulina, this is kind of a long, weird title, isn't it?
It is.
What's the name of the show?
It is Dracula, the Feminist Revenge Fantasy.
Really?
So there you go. This obviously is not the regular Dracula that people know and love. So maybe first of all, I'm curious, what about it is similar to the original Dracula?
I'd say the characters are still like, usually there's Dracula, who is the antagonist mostly, and then Van Helsing is always going to be the protagonist, right? And there's always going to be a Jonathan Harker, but the twist is mostly like most of the characters are gender swapped.
Okay.
Because it's a feminist, yeah.
Okay. So you play Dracula, but you play Van Helsing, and Van Helsing is usually a male, as depicted in the book. And Van Helsing is after Dracula. Is that the case? Or
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
kind of the vampire hunter. So this is a show that has a feminist angle or a bent to it. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I think that this show showcased the differences of what like women are supposed to be like in this time period, because it's very, in the 1950s, maybe before the 1800s, I think. And, it shows the roles of women just having to be finding a husband, bearing children, and get married and just stay at home. And Van Helsing is kind of challenging those views and saying, we don't have to be at home. We can do more than that. And kind of, she differences herself from all the other characters and says, I kind of want to challenge all of those views and make my own self. So I think it's very different from that. It takes Dracula, who is a man and who is very misogynistic in the show, to, a woman who is wanting to challenge him for that and destroy him in the process.
So Dracula obviously is not gender swapped in this case, but it's important that Dracula is a man because
his misogynistic nature, which contrasts that of the feminist twist of the story.
Okay. Does this show still have blood? Does it still Does it still follow that part of the storyline?
Oh yes, there's blood, there's fog, there's silver dust, there's a lot of blood. Yeah.
Crosses.
Oh, the crosses, knives, stakes, everything. There's some fight choreo we had to do. It's pretty fun.
Okay.
Fun stuff.
So just for like a brief plot summary, we still have the women that you domineer and basically you kind of hypnotize them, right?
So for the women that I hypnotize, there's usually my wives, Marilla and Drusilla, right? And then there comes along another woman named Lucy Westenra, right? Which is Dr. Seward's wife. And I pretty much commandeer her, like you say, manipulate her, hypnotize her to become another one of my concubines, as you say. And then there's also Jonathan Harker, who I will be controlling also.
Okay. So Count Dracula then, he is a very persuasive, suave.
Very suave.
Very bloodthirsty, I guess. How do you play Dracula, especially considering that this is a role that's been played by so many men?
Honestly, at first, when I first was introduced to the character Dracula, I loved Dracula. Honestly, I've always watched all the movies and stuff, like shows, games, and all that stuff. And honestly, when I first looked at Dracula, I was like, what does Dracula really do? It's like there's always that suave to him. There's always that strong personality. Like he's always powerful. You know what I mean? And I pretty much added a little bit of my twist, having a little bit more of a sexiness to his persona.
Okay. For you, what is it like to play this character that's traditionally a man? Did you have to change? Not the line readings, but was there anything that you had to kind of adjust?
I mean, I don't think so, really, just because I feel like I am very much like Van Helsing. I have a very strong attitude and I'm a very strong feminist. So to me, it was easy to step into that role and just kind of be like, okay, I'm just going to talk over these men and I'm not going to let them tear me down and I'm going to hunt them down and try and kill them as best as possible. So it wasn't that hard. I think it was just more about, filling out those shoes of Van Helsing and the idea of this hunter who's supposed to be, really strong and secure of themselves. And playing as a woman, I think is just really cool. So I don't think it was hard. It's just try my best to just have fun with it, but it's still make sure that the message comes across.
As a feminist, had you consciously absorbed stories like Dracula thinking that they were misogynistic?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it also made me look at other stories like that are very well known and say, oh, okay, now how come, they're the main role? And I think as an actor too, I look at some of the roles or I go into auditions, I'm like, how come I have to audition for a side role all the time? Like, how come it's very hard for me to find a leading role when it shouldn't be, Especially like a Latina woman as well, like trying to find something like that, that it's not super stereotypical. So getting to play Van Helsing, who's very well known and, this character, very strong, was like very exciting for me. And I'm still so excited to open it.
So, Stephen, what is it about the Dracula story or about the vampire theme in general that you think is so enduring? We just keep coming back to it.
God, it's gotta be that, like, he's always has that sense of, like, just the power, you know what I mean? He's such a powerful character that I think it's so timeless that everything, like, from his, like, movements, from the way he controls people, the way he's so confident that everyone just keeps coming back to his character, I love it.
So there is violence, there's gore, but the show is also kind of has some bright spots as well, right? A little bit of an attitude, a sense of humor. Do you think that's important for an adaptation like this?
I think so. I think it has to have some kind of comedy in it. Because it also contains a lot of irony, which I think is what makes it funny. Like a lot of the satire that we introduce into the show is what makes you look like, oh, yeah, that's funny, how ironic. And then you can go home after watching the show and be like, be in a position, especially as a woman, be in a situation where you're like, oh, that's funny. Where did I see that? Oh, in this show. Oh, so that means, it's not very feministic, it's very misogynistic. Maybe we should change that. So I think it's just an easier way to talk to the audiences. I think that's the way that we can get through them. If it's not easy to get to them through, hey, let's be feministic, let's equalize women and men, then maybe with a little bit of laughter, they'll be like, oh, that makes sense. And then, get them on our side little by little.
So the playwright is well known for taking these older stories like Jane Austen, Dracula, and kind of pepping them up, I guess, moving them to the present day. So Stephen, what do you think the value is in that, in revisiting some of these older tales?
Honestly, I'm just, it's kind of like when you try to revisit songs, for example, like when you're trying to go back to like the Beatles, for example, it's kind of like that. We just have to see the value and history of like film and all that stuff, because Dracula is so like old and it's just such a timeless like story, and it should be told like for generations and generations.
You think about it, Dracula and Van Helsing, those are like two of the most famous characters out there. So it's like you're walking in the footsteps of of a lot of great actors.
Yeah.
Is this show for kids? What are you telling younger people?
Yeah, no. I do believe we have an age limit. I believe it's 12 and up.
12 and up, okay.
Yeah, just because there's some topics. I mean, we mentioned there's blood, there's a lot of knives, there's a lot of weapons. There's also some mention of other topics like suicide and stuff that maybe are not so appropriate for kids. I think maybe in the future, once they get older, maybe they can revisit the show and then watch it at one time. But other than that, we very much advise audiences to just keep it mature, for sure.
And just to kind of top things off, I want you both to give kind of a pitch for why should you come to see a Fresno State theater production, especially if you haven't gone here before.
As a person who was from another country, I've only been here for like 4 years. Theater, especially Fresno State Theater, has been an inspiration to me, honestly. It's gotten me to come out more and be more out with people, talk to people more, communicate. And I think just watching just shows is just so nice because everyone, you just see like everyone just working all together, getting all the sets, like the set design done, all the acting, all the intricate stuff, and it's just all coming together, which really, honestly, just brings me to tears sometimes, you know? And I think people should watch that because of that.
We'll give you the last word.
Okay.
Pauline.
I think you should come see a Fresno State Theater show because a lot of the directors here tend to do a lot of the shows that have a lot of meanings. You know, I've been under the direction of Gina, I've been under the direction of Brad Myers, I've been under the direction now of Jay Daniel, and then all the shows that I've been in have had a message behind them that is very intricate for all the people to know. And I think that the audiences here in Fresno and even around the valley have been great at just coming out and showing support. So definitely just come in and see a show. It's a different experience having that one-on-one, especially in the theater that we're on right now. We're so close to the audience that they'll definitely see all those moments that you don't want to miss. It's way better than a film, 100%.
Oh yeah, I mean, to be in a live theater production, I can't even think of any time I've seen Dracula live, so I'm looking forward to it. Sounds scary. Well, thank you very much. I know you got to get backstage and get ready for this important, is this first dress? Second dress rehearsal. So yeah, appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Oh, big declaration from a shaking little woman.
Get away, I'm warning you.
So we are here with J. Daniel Herring, who is the director of the show. What drew you to this Dracula, this new version of Dracula?
Well, what drew me to Dracula is that as a child, I loved horror. I just loved it. My fondest memory is Halloween, when all of those black and white horror films would come out, the Dracula, the Frankenstein, the werewolf. And I would beg my mother, honestly, to stay up and watch those. And she would say, you know what's going to happen? You're going to be calling my name in the middle of the night because you're going to have nightmares. And I would say, no, Mom, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Well, of course, I would watch it. And what would I do in the middle of the night but call my mom because I was scared to death from watching those. But I absolutely loved them. And years later, now 25 years ago, when I was at Stage One, I got to direct a Frankenstein. So that sort of was the first time I got to do horror. And then I kept sort of thinking, Actors Theater of Louisville, which is where I was for 20 years, was always doing Dracula, and I saw several productions of it there. So it was not really a place for me to do Dracula in Louisville. And I thought, someday I'm going to do Dracula. And I kept looking at scripts and had directed Kate Hamill's Pride and Prejudice at Good Company Players. And someone said, you got to look at her Dracula. I think you'll love it. And of course, I looked at it and I did love it. And I thought, okay, here's the Dracula I got to do. And so I pitched it. And so here I am doing Dracula. And Donald, I think horror is a totally different category of theater. It isn't just drama, it isn't just comedy, it isn't just melodrama, it isn't just, it's a conglomerate of things, and the challenges in it are how do you do gore on stage, and how do you scare people, and how do you make people laugh, and I think it's just a different kind of challenge, and I think it's just been such fun to sort of do something that you haven't been able to do before, and trace it all the way back to your childhood and use some of the things from your childhood. Honestly, in this show, there are moments that I remember from those films that I have put in this show.
So when you announced you were doing Dracula, what was the response of the student age casting pool? Are they as into Dracula as young people were 30, 40 years ago?
They were.
So it's something that's endured.
It has endured, but I also think, again, it was the horror aspect. Like, okay, this is not your typical kind of play, and getting to play characters like these characters in something that's not your typical drama or your typical comedy, but something that is this horror, gore kind of, I mean, we even have sort of zombie-ish stuff in this show because you got to deal with transitions. How do you get dead bodies off stage? You know, so you've seen enough of my work to know I hate blackouts. So I'm always looking for ways to do transitions to make that part of the show for the audience as well, and not just do a blackout. So that's become part of the storytelling of this Dracula, and just how dead bodies become spirits, or become zombies, or become whatever they need to become. So that's been part of the storytelling and the direction of this show as well. So I think the cast has just been so entrenched in this sort of style of this horror that they really have just taken to it and see it as a challenge in a different way than some other shows that they've been in.
I can see why it would be a challenge to do live horror, because people are they're so used to those horror movie conventions. And horror movie directors get so many tricks that they can work with, quick cuts and scary music and all that stuff. And your audience is a little bit farther away from the action.
Right.
So has it been tough for you at all?
It has, but I think the thing that's been great is even the designers have met that challenge in a way that's theatrical. For instance, the blood challenge in this, we're doing what we call we're doing what's called, I don't know if we called it fake blood, but fake blood and live blood. So there's live blood, which will shoot out and drip and be on the stage and be on people's faces, but there's also blood that's woven into the costume design. Okay. So there's ways in which we are doing theatrical blood, but also live blood. Now, not live blood from the real person, right. But live stage blood.
I can only imagine the university forms you would have to fill out.
Right. And but also in the sound design of this show, and I made that was up front, how important the sound design of this show was. In fact, the sound design of this show is probably more like a film than it is a stage play. There are many scenes that are completely underscored in this. So that has been really quite fun for the sound designer. And the sound designer is a student, and getting to do a show like this, I think she's just overjoyed to have gotten this show and has just done an incredible job with it. And I think that the audience is going to be like, am I watching a play or is this a film, in a way?
So let's talk about the gender swapping a little bit. Van Helsing is usually a man. Were you tempted at all to make Dracula a woman, or would that have just really messed up the balance?
No, Kate Hamill would have come after me with
Okay.
No, I think Dracula needed to stay a man because you needed that male who has gotten power hungry. Kate wrote this. Kate wrote this at a time, it was right during the pandemic, right before the pandemic, and then it got done after more. And I think she was writing this at a time during a political time in our country, and I think she had some people in mind.
Okay.
And I think she was writing about men who get power, and they abuse that power, and it goes way too, and in fact, there's a line in the play about how fearful Van Helsing is about any man, human, getting too much power and it getting away from them. And that's really what it's about. And I think that that's why Dracula needed to stay a male. So I was never tempted to do that, and yet I also think what's great about the way Jonathan is taken over by Dracula and Lucy is taken over by Dracula, that there isn't a difference in who that powerful person can control. It can be a male or a female that they control. And I think that I like about the way in which the story is told.
Now, Stephen mentioned that he does have a take that includes sex appeal.
Right.
People often equate vampires with this sexual imagery. What is why are we so interested in vampires? Is it Is it sexual?
I think some of it is. I think you can't help but feel that because, you know, there's a certain, you're almost under their spell, under their power, because they are sexy, they are powerful, they are, all of those things draw you in, you know, and there's lines in the play that says if they were deformed or ugly or had fangs, we would stay away from them. But we don't because they draw us in. And, you know, I think that's what's also interesting about it is she takes away that idea that they look different. And, you know, the movies don't really do that. They make them look different most of the time. And I think what's interesting about this play is that they should look almost better than the normal everyday person, so that we're drawn to them, and then they've got us under their spell. So I find that kind of an interesting twist in the play.
Well, I think it's very fun that you get to direct a horror play.
Right.
And it is interesting why horror endures. As you know, you make a horror movie these days, it's probably going to be #1 at the box office. So it must speak to something within us psychologically that loves to be scared. Maybe you leave that fright behind you. Right. I don't know.
Well, when people come to see the show, I put in the program, I found something from NPR in about, I think it was 2022, where they talked about why we like horror or why people like it. And they listed about a dozen things that is why. And one of the ones that you almost said right there is that we like being scared. It sort of sends adrenaline through our body, and we sort of get excited about that, being scared. And one of the ones I remember now is that we look at it and go, oh, if they can overcome that, I can overcome what I'm overcoming. And then the one that I identified with was I will watch horror when I'm got a lot of anxiety going on in my life. And my partner will say to me, why are you watching that when you're having such a difficult time in life? And I said, somehow it relaxes me. And that's one of the things that they say, for some people, horror relaxes them. So it's interesting that I think all of us are, if you're attracted to horror, you may be attracted for a variety of different reasons. You different from me and me different from the next person as to why we're attracted to it.
Yeah. Well, tell us when and where people can come see Dracula.
Well, Dracula will be in the Woods Theater on the Fresno State campus. We open this Friday, and we play this Friday, Saturday, and this Sunday. And then we will be dark next Monday, and then we will open again on Tuesday and play Tuesday through Saturday.
And the show will close?
On Saturday, October 5th.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time on this busy night. It's the second dress rehearsal, but we wanted to be sure we get the word out on this one.
Well, I appreciate it, Donald. I'm excited for people to come see it. I think if you've never seen a horror play on stage, this is the one to see.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.